So 4.4, solve ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0 by factoring. So the difference in what we did yesterday and these is that now there's going to be a number in front. So there were no notes for this section because there's not really anything you can do for it, but we call it the arch method. That's about the only thing I can tell you is you multiply the number in front by the other number, and then we go from there. And so that would have been literally the only note, so that's why we don't have notes. But 3n squared plus 7n plus 4. So I'm looking for factors of 3 times 4, so factors of 12 that add up to give me 7. So what would that be?
4 and 3.
Yep, 4 and 3. And so we want to line up as best as possible the numbers with the other number. So this is going to be 3n squared plus 3n plus 4n plus 4. So these ones you kind of have to have those intermediate steps to be able to do them. And then we factor by grouping. So we group the two things, and we take the biggest thing out of each grouping that we can. So what's the biggest thing I can take out of here? And what else is in? 3n. And that leaves me with n plus 1. What's the biggest thing I can take out of this grouping? 4. So then that leaves me with n plus 1. Now, these have to match. If these don't match, something is wrong. Okay, so then our final factors would be 3n plus 4 and n plus 1. And that would be your answer. Now, since most of y'all did factoring here with my mom, I'm sure you learned this method or whatever. I think I don't remember what she called it. There's like a trial and error thing or something that she does sometimes that somebody taught her. But Ethan knows this other method that he attempted to teach me last year, and I was just so like set in how I've done this for so long that I had a really hard time like understanding it. But it was actually pretty easy. It's called a slide method. So if you're just like, this doesn't make sense, ask Ethan, and I'm sure he'd explain it to you. It's a cool method. I like this one. It's what I've done for, well, I don't even know how many years, but a long time. 6. 6p squared plus 5p plus 1. So factors of 6 times 1, so factors of 6 that add up to give me 5. So if I do that, that means that this is going to be a negative. Well, what other factors of 6 are there? 2 and 3.
Oh, I'm dumb.
Okay. So again, that's why if you had done that when it was all said and done, you would need to go back and FOIL it to check it. So this one, it really doesn't matter. Like up here, I paired up the 3 and the 4 with their respective 3 and 4. But with this one, because it's a 2 and 3, it really doesn't make a difference. It's kind of just your preference. It's going to come out the same way, final answer, regardless of which one you put where. So I'm going to go 6p squared plus 2p plus 3p plus 1. So in this first grouping, I'm going to take out a 2p, and that leaves me with 3p plus 1. Over here in this grouping, there's nothing directly that I can take out, so I'm technically taking out a 1. And I do that not because you necessarily need to show that, but because people often write it wrong if they don't put it. And so then your answer would be 2p plus 1 times 3p plus 1. Because it's the number that you've taken out of both pieces added together, or whatever the sign is on the one that you took out. So like if I had, like, hypothetically, if I had to take out a negative over here, it would have been 2p minus 1.
Okay.
Which it's a little harder to see on the ones that are only positive. The next one has negatives, so it'll be a little easier to see what's happening with that. All right, 10. 14m squared plus m minus 3. So I need factors of 14 and negative 3 that give me 1. So a lot of times what I do is I just go ahead and break this down this way. And I know that the answer is going to be negative, but when added together, gives me a positive here. So I'm looking for positive 1. So I might need to break it down again. So what factors give me a positive 1 out of what I have left? I've got to use all of them. And remember, one of them is going to be positive and one of them is going to be negative. I need a positive 1 to be my result.
Can you do negative 2 times positive 3 rather than 7?
No, I've got to have 2 factors. I need 2 numbers, just like I did up here, like 2 times 3. Now, the only difference is one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive because this number is negative.
Negative 6 and 7.
Yes, negative 6 and 7. So we've got there and there. Okay, so the 14 is broken down into 2 and 7. I have to use all of these 3 numbers in some fashion. 6 and 7, well, 7 minus 6 gives me a positive 1. So I would line up, personally, the 7 with the 14 and then the 6 with the 3 because those are things that I know I'll be able to pull something out of, but it won't matter which way you do it. It'll still give you the same answer either way. So 14m squared plus 7m minus 6m minus 3. So out of the first 2, I can take out a 7m. That leaves me with 2m plus 1. Out of the next 2, I can take out a negative 3, which leaves me with 2m plus 1. And the reason that I knew I needed to take out the negative is because otherwise these factors here wouldn't match. Okay, so in the world, just like underlined everything. Just happened. So now I've got 7m minus 3 times 2m plus 1. And obviously we could FOIL to check, and should if you're doing it on your own. But I have the answer key in front of me, so I know it's right. All right, so yesterday we learned about 2 special types as well. A difference of squares and a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so those ones we did yesterday were pretty easy because obviously there was no number in front. Now we have the same special types, but there's going to be numbers out front. So something like 14. I've got 4r squared minus 25. So which special type would this be? Trinomial means what? How many terms? 3. So this can't be that. So what is this one? Difference of squares. There's a difference of squares. Okay, so the way this works now with there being numbers in front, I just want you to visualize this. This is 2r squared minus 5 squared. Okay, so when we do our factors, it's going to be the number in parentheses like that I've written of the whole thing being squared. So this will be 2r plus 5 times 2r minus 5. So yesterday when we did the ones without the number in front, it was just r plus 5, r minus 5. So now we have something out front, and so we use that. I don't know if it happens in this section necessarily, but sometimes these problems will have something that you need to take out first, and then it'll get it down to something that you can do a difference of squares on. Let's see. 16s squared plus 8s plus 1. What special type is this? Perfect square trinomial. So this term is all being squared, okay, right? Because 4 squared is 16, so that whole term is squared. 1 squared, this is the one that often gets people. They forget that 1 squared is just 1, and so they won't recognize this as a perfect square trinomial, which, again, just like yesterday, if you forgot that it was, you could do it without doing it that way. You could do it still by this arch method that we've been doing up here. And then the middle is 2 times the first term times the last term. So this is 4s quantity squared. So this is going to be 4s. Because this is positive, it's going to be plus 1 squared. Let's see, 25 t squared minus 30t plus 9. What is this? Yep, perfect square trinomial. So I've got 5t squared is the first term. The last term is 3 squared, right? And then the middle term is 2 times 5 times 3 times t, which is how we got to the 30. So I've got a negative sign in the middle, so what does that mean about my sign of what's going in here? It's going to be negative, so what goes in this box? Or in the box, in the parentheses?
5
minus 3.
Yep, and then the whole thing gets squared. Alright, so the next ones in this section, they say factor the monomials first, and then it just says factor the expression. So that's basically just cluing you in that you're going to need to take something out before you actually factor, basically, okay? Now, on the quiz or the test, it won't say that. It's just going to say factor, and you're going to have to recognize if you need to take something out first or not. So, like 22, we've got 12x squared minus 4x minus 40. Now, what I'm going to say is not that you can't factor this as it sits, but it's going to make it way more difficult. Okay, so if you ever see that you can take something out of all the pieces, do that first. Okay, because it will, I promise, make your life way easier. So what is something that's in common with every piece that I could take out? 4. So I'm going to take out a 4 first. So I'm going to have 4 times 3x squared minus x minus 10. Now I've got to make sure that 4 comes down the whole time with me so that I don't forget about it and lose it, because your answer won't be right if you leave the 4 out. So I, again, am going to arch method, so I need factors of negative 30 that when added together give me negative 1. And which one's positive and which one's negative?
6 negative.
6 is negative, so the middle number is negative, so my bigger number needs to be negative. So this is going to be negative 6 and positive 5. So I've got 4 times 3x squared minus 6x plus 5x minus 10. Okay, and I did that intentionally because the 3 and 6 have something in common, 5 and 10 have something in common, so it just makes life a little bit easier. Factor by grouping. So I'm still bringing that 4 down and don't want you to forget about it. I can take a 3x out of the first one. That leaves me with x minus 2. I can take a 5 out of the second pairing, which gives me x minus 2. So ultimately, I end up with 4 times 3x plus 5 times x minus 2. Uh, 26. 12m squared minus 36m plus 27. So what can come out of this one?
3.
3, so that leaves me with 4m squared minus 12m plus 9. Now, what do you notice about this? Yep, it's a perfect square trinomial because this term is squared, this term is something squared over here, and 2 times this term gives me this term. Now, what do I know about the middle of it? What sign is going to be in the middle? Negative, because middle term is negative. So, what goes here? 2m and 3. All right, I'm going to do one of the problems where we are factoring and solving. So it says to solve the equation. So just like we did yesterday. So once you get down to fact or having it factored, then we just set it equal to 0 and solve like we did yesterday. So if you feel like you need to see more than one, I obviously can do that. But if we're good on it, then we'll just stop after that probably. Let me see. Actually, I might do 2, but we'll start with this one. 36, we've got 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 equals 0. So what do I need to do? It is a perfect square trinomial because this term is squared and this term is something squared, and 2 times each of those terms gives me this one. So what is that going to factor into? 2x.
2x minus 5.
Yep. Equals 0. So the squared basically is just going to go away when I'm solving it because it's the same term, it's repeated. So I've got 2x minus 5 equals 0, so 2x equals 5, so x equals 5 halves. Now I am going to do one more just so you see something make sure we know how to do ones that have multiple terms with these. 38, 15x squared plus 7x minus 2 equals 0. So how would I factor this one?
Oh, 3, negative 3, 10.
Negative 3 and 10. So 15x squared. I'm going to put the negative 3 with that. So negative 3x plus 10x minus 2. And really, it didn't matter. I could have done it either way. I don't know why that was what I was feeling to do. Now what?
Oh, you can take the 5 out, so not 5. Take 3 out. It's be 5x.
Yeah. If you had flipped the terms, then obviously a 5 could have come out, but yes. So take out a 3x, and that leaves me with
5. Oh,
X
yeah.
minus 1.
and then what about this one?
You can take 2 out.
Take a 2 out. 5x minus 1. Terms match, so I'm good to go. So now I have 3x plus 2 times 5x minus 1 equals 0. And just, to put a plug in for checking again, this would be a good point to stop and refoil and make sure you get back to here before you finish solving it because, So now at this point we break this up. So we have 3x plus 2 equals 0 and 5x minus 1 equals 0. So we end up with x is equal to negative 2/3 or x is equal to 1/5 would be our two answers. So mainly just wanted to make sure that you saw that, one that actually had to be factored out a little bit better. All right. Any questions? All right. 3 through 27, every other odd. So, 3, skip 5, 7, etc. And then also 33 and 37.